The reason I wanted to make this series in the first place, let's talk about one of the greatest superhero games of all time. At least it was for about 5 years. Yo, we telling my guys is Big Riz, and while Sam Raimi was directing the greatest superhero movie ever made, not even close. It's just Heath Ledger. Maybe. Okay, yeah, no, this is the best. This is actually the best one. But right on schedule, Treyarch was developing the sequel to the movie tie-in, and boy, I actually think this might be the biggest technological leap between the games this series will see. And a big thanks to that is the fact that we're now in the middle of the PS2 console generation. They've already released a slim version, the PS3 is just right around the corner, and there already is a more bigger focus on open world 3D games like GTA 3 already being out for a couple of years now. And I kind of want to talk about probably one of the biggest transitional leaps between the two games, and that's with Traversal. A quick glimpse at this game will show you that the graphics seem to have been downgraded, which is rare for a sequel. However, Spider-Man 2, like I mentioned, is not a linear level by level game. You have the entirety of Manhattan, or at least a shrunken down version of the city, to free roam in. You traverse this new open world city by swinging with this new physics-based pendulum motion, and the webs finally stick to the buildings. And this isn't just for aesthetics, you actually need something within range to swing from. This can include cranes, trees, and even various helicopters that will drag you along their path if you hold on while attached to the helicopter. The swinging in itself is incredibly tricky to master. I've gotten so used to the assisted swinging of the current games that I forgot just how much more of a learning curve that there is. Even an hour or two in, I was still kind of getting the hang of it, and what I mean by the swinging being hard is as the webs are attached to buildings, it will naturally pull you towards it. If you swing too low, you'll hit the ground. If you swing too high, or at least higher than any swing points like in parks, you'll start to drop. But with a bit of practice, pulling off clean swings without hitting anything is super satisfying. At the start of the game, it gives you the option of 2 swing modes, normal and easy. The easy mode in itself isn't making the swinging any easier, but instead Spidey has to hold onto a web line as long as you are holding R2, and if you let go of R2, then he will let go of the web line. Where in normal mode, you'll hold the line perpetually until you press R2 again, or if you jump from the web line. If you press R2 again whilst holding onto a web line, you'll be able to shoot another web line, which I don't really know what the purpose of this is. At first I thought it was for making quick turns, but honestly it's not that much different from doing it normally. The only real reason I would see doing this is with the web catapult, which even then doesn't make you go that much quicker or further than swinging normally. The swinging is paired with an introduced web zip move, which allows you to boost yourself forward if you need to get just a few extra feet before you can start swinging again. And for that extra spice, they added a couple of air tricks which are triggered by pressing the air. And for that extra spice, they added a couple of air tricks which you can trigger by pressing the jump button multiple times. The swinging alone is so innovative and so, well, Spider-Man, that it set a new standard for how traversal should be done within these games. Oh, and before I forget, when you let go of a web line, it doesn't just disappear. You can still see strands of webbing hanging from the swing points. The second way Spider-Man moves around is through... Actually, I'll let Bruce say it for me.
First things first. You're not much of a wall crawler if you can't, stick to walls, so here's what you do.
Yeah, he's back dissing you in the tutorials. Unlike the previous games, touching a wall doesn't immediately make you stick to it. Instead, you have to press circle to stick to surfaces. If you don't, then you'll slide down the wall, which will make for a much more controlled descent, as falling from a high enough point can injure or even cause a game over. The last traversal mechanic introduced to the game are the high jumps and the fast button. When you hold L2 while moving around, you'll sprint, hold it while going up a building and you'll climb faster, and if you press it whilst in a swing, you'll push yourself on your swing to go even further, because speed equals distance over time. When you hold down the jump button, a yellow bar next to your health will fill up, and letting go will make you jump relative to how much of the bar was filled. Along with the new traversal methods, the Spidey compass and height meter are replaced with a mini-map, which shows both you and the objective relative to how high either of you are from the ground. There is also a bigger map which gives you an idea of everything in the city, however, you cannot yet place a custom waypoint. The only ones are specifically for story missions, so you really need to develop some sort of city knowledge to get around if you don't want to keep pulling up your map every 30 seconds. This is pretty much everything that needs to be said about the new traversal mechanics, and honestly, it's the reason this game is remembered so well. Swinging, although challenging, is just a load of fun. Now let's talk about the second way this game changed mechanics, and that's with the combat. Okay, I know this is another ramble, but I've never had a chance to fully speak on this issue. And it's bugged me for, and I'm not joking, 14 years. And look, this isn't an Arkham video. There's a very high chance I'll speak about these games along the line. But I just want to talk about how the combat in the Arkham games wasn't a completely fresh thought. It follows a simple one button to attack, one button to counter. And not only were they not the first games to do it, they weren't even the second. Assassin's Creed was doing it a couple of years beforehand. Now, is the gameplay in Spider-Man or Assassin's Creed half as polished and refined as Batman Arkham? Absolutely not. But I wouldn't even mention these things if IGN and GameSpot and all the other reviewers didn't keep comparing this and calling them a complete copycats of these. Now let's get back to the video. So yeah, just like the Arkham games, the combat consists of an attack button and a dodge button. When an enemy is about to attack you, your spider sense will flash, and pressing the circle button will dodge the attack. You can combo attacks with the triangle button to mix and match melee and web attacks. From a dodge, you have a few options to counter attack. Some are given off rip, and over time you can unlock new moves, like the spinning counter kick, which is really useful as it gets rid of one of the biggest flaws in countering in this game, which is by during an animation of either the dodge or a counter, you cannot defend yourself, which means dealing with multiple enemies around you doesn't work, especially if people are shooting at you. There's little to no room for error. Maybe I seem to be better at the game, but come on, what am I supposed to do here? With these new combat mechanics came a new plethora of enemies. Some can block and dodge your attacks, which will force you to have some variety in your attack. The traditional web attacks from the previous game are gone, except from the web bomb, which is now used to web up those stronger enemies. Oh, and the web pull / disarm move is still here. The rest consists of more... this is not the right word, but I'm going to say realistic web moves, such as being able to pull someone upwards to do some new aerial attacks, and a web grab which allows you to do this really sick pile driver move, and one of my favorites, the web rodeo, which knocks an enemy into the other enemies around you. When the game does get a little bit overwhelming, there's a blue bar right below your health, and since Spider-Man doesn't run out of webbing in this game, this toggles the spider reflex mode, which slows down time around you, making attacks easier to see, and you can also dish out heavier kicks. Let's go over the world, or city that's at your disposal. The first is the random crimes that I encounter as you swing around. These are highlighted by a small blue waypoint, which includes reckless drivers, muggings, assaults, and the most random event in the series, the balloon kid. See, there's this kid that lets go of his balloon, which causes it to rise, and he starts to cry really loudly. And your goal is to time your jumps and swings perfectly, as wearing the balloon will cause it to pop. When you do catch the balloon, you're supposed to give it back to the kid. But I didn't do that, bro. Even when I was trying to give that back to him, bro, my man was still crying. So I gave that shit to Mary Jane, bro. As well as the random encounters, there are more tied in events through civilians who shout at you to hear them out. These encounters are a bit more complex, like helping people going to the hospital, helping people from falling off buildings, shootouts, and even setup chicks who will call you to speak to them just so you can get jumped. And my favorite optional mission in the whole game, the whole series really, the pizza delivery. This mission requires you to deliver pizzas to multiple people close to the pizza shop, while this absolute banger plays while you do the mission. You also have to avoid doing fancy flips, as this will cause a pizza to smush inside the box, which will lead to very unhappy customers. Then you have to return the bag back to the shop before the time runs out. Honestly, the song alone makes this such an iconic meme, because the only thing more New York than Spider-Man is pizza. There were also time trial races that I didn't really much get into, because all the other side missions are basically that anyway, just completing a course within a certain time frame. The other side activity which I didn't bother going through the hassle of doing is the collectathons that I never really was a fan of in any game anyway. The world in this game is extremely well done for a first attempt, with the only other game that allows you to free roam New York at the time being GTA 3, which normally kept you grounded on the floor with these huge buildings around you, meaning that they can increase graphics because they don't need to have such great render distances. I feel like that's the reason why the graphics in that game is nowhere near close to the Spider-Man game, but considering what they had to work with, I think it's really well. I mean, plus GTA 3 was released on PC, and then there's graphics mods, and I'm rambling again, aren't I? And that was Spider-Man 2, a game that redefined the superhero genre for an entire generation, a couple of generations. Honestly, if it wasn't for GTA 3 coming out a couple of years prior, I would be saying that this was the most definitive open world 3D city game. A game that set a new standard for superhero games going forth, and a now dead breed of movie tie-in games, because I don't think they ever did one better than this. The combat mechanics, the traversal, and the world this game introduces are the reason why this is held to such high standard and why it's remembered so fondly. And even though video games age like milk, there's no surprise where this is going to go on the tier list. If it wasn't for this game, then there is a whole plethora of video games that I grew up playing that just wouldn't exist because of the standard that Treyarch set all those years ago. I'm going to finish this off with a little ramble and an anecdote about this game and why it's so special to me, at least. When I was like 12 or 13, I had an infection in my hip and I had to get sent to the hospital, and I was admitted there for like several weeks. And because I was still a child at the time, they put me in a children's ward with a bunch of crying little and I hated it. I could not sleep. But one of the nurses was really nice, and she found a donated PS2, and the only game that they had that was donated again was Spider-Man 2. It's not this version, obviously, I didn't keep it with me, but this was when I completed the game for the first time. I was 13, 12, I think I was 12, so about 2010, so about 6 years later. And yeah, and I didn't have it. And what they didn't do was, have a donated memory card, so I had to complete this in one sitting. What I had to do was I had to leave a note on the TV saying do not touch, and just leave it on running overnight. Some of the nurses didn't listen. I had to do this thing all over again. But yeah, honestly, this game saved me in that period because I would have died. Literally. I would have been dead if it wasn't for this game. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was probably one of the most long awaited ones out of the project, and I will catch you guys in the next one. We're actually taking a break from the movie tie-in games. There's one game in between Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. That's what we're going to get into next. I haven't got a lot of time to complete these games. So yeah, I'm going to just speed run this, okay? Safe.